Welcome everyone to the latest of a series I like to call History Speaks. On today's show, I'm thrilled to welcome a lady who loves Tudor England and everything that went on in that period of time. She also runs her own podcast, The Tudor Her Story, and can be found travelling around the UK, bringing knowledge from all corners of this prolific society through her visits to Tudor haunts. So please give a warm welcome to my guest today, Jessica Faulkner. Hi Jess, how are you?
Hi John, I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to come on.
It's an absolute pleasure. I've heard a lot about you. I've heard you're very knowledgeable and everything. So I'm hoping that our next 30 minutes or so, or whatever it's going to be, is going to be, well, I'm sure I'm going to learn something anyway, if nobody else does. But as always, I like to start these conversations with something a little off the wall. Now, I'm going to give you a date of 20th of June, 2018. Do you know its significance?
I think that is when I began Unholy Tudor.
Well, I was going to say, it's your very first image on Instagram.
Is it? Is that the first date?
First one. And you were talking, go on, see, can you remember what you were talking about?
I want to say it was probably Natalie Dormer and the Tudors.
It is Tudor related. You were talking about how Henry had ordered all the removals of the H&A after his marriage to Anne Boleyn. And I think it's a picture somewhere inside, maybe Hampton Court, somewhere like that.
Oh, I know the post you mean. Yeah, it's in Hampton Court, under the archway.
That's it, yeah.
And it's all the H&As. And obviously he ordered all the removals, but obviously some survived.
They did. Some did survive. He didn't do his work very well, did he? You know what I mean? So... But it just shows that I do my research, because I had a look, went right back to the beginning of your Instagram. It's 6 years ago now. It's amazing, really. But let's get on to your questions. So, how did you first become interested in history, and what's your background?
So, I've always loved history. I've always had a thirst for history, but I've got to say it started when I was about 6 or 7. We were learning in year 2 for anyone in the UK, and it was all about Walter Raleigh and the Elizabethan period. And I think I fell in love a little bit with Walter Raleigh because I just found him so interesting, how he was able to stay in favour of the Queen, but then lost favour so badly with James VI or the First. And that's just when it started, really. And then from then on, I've always been interested, but I've not been interested in the Tudors until I was about 13, 14. That's when it really started for me. And it's because of the HBO series, The Tudors. Now, it's already been out for a few years by then, but my mum introduced me to it. And I loved it. I know it's really inaccurate, but the drama of it, I just loved. And then from then on, I've been obsessed. But at the moment, I'm currently studying for a degree in history at the Open University. And as you say, I've had my Instagram for 6 years now. And then last year, I launched my podcast highlighting the lives of the Tudor women as well.
You did. And very good it is.
Thank you.
Your journey, I guess, into history then is more progressive than anything else. It's not something you've just kind of gone into straight out of, through school or whatever, but it's been a progression, if you like. And it's always fascinating to see how these personal passions shape the stories we're drawn to. Now, Anne Boleyn, as I know, is a lady close to your historical heart. So what is it about her that really resonates with you?
I think that's a fantastic question, and I think it's one everyone asks me as well. What is it about Anne Boleyn that resonates? And I think, in a very weird way, she's quite relatable to the modern day. I think how she acted in the 16th century is quite modern. And I mean, I know that might sound a bit silly, but I think she knew what she wanted in a time where women did not have a choice. And she knew her own mind, maybe too well, and maybe she spoke her mind a little bit too well. But I think that's what resonates about me, is she was so courageous and so willing to be her own person. I think that's quite inspiring for young women like me today.
It is, and it's clear that Anne Boleyn holds a special significance for you. And exploring her story reveals so many intriguing facets of her character. Now, delving a little bit deeper into this, there's much to uncover about how she's been portrayed and understood over time. So, Anne, of course, is by far one of Henry's most possibly outspoken characters, and probably demanding as well. So what have you learnt about her demeanour?
I think you could safely say that Anne is not a boring figure. I think there are multiple layers to her personality. And I think at times that she could be quite unlikable. I mean, the way that we have some accounts of the way she treated Princess Mary shows Anne in a very nice light. But I also think Anne could be charitable, kind and loving to her family and those who supported her. But I think what people forget is when Anne hit the limelight, when she became the mistress of Henry VIII, she was under an incredible amount of pressure, and she was put into a light that she was not used to. She was used to being at court, but this was a different league when she was going to become the future wife of a king. And then when she does marry Henry after 7 years, she's then got to produce a son, because that's what this has all been about. And sadly, she doesn't produce a son. So you just see the cracks show in Anne's personality, especially when she marries Henry. You can see the pressure she's under. You see how much more she snaps and how she's irritable with everybody. And you actually have accounts by 1535 of how tired she looks, how she looks like an old woman. And I think Anne was a woman so bogged down by pressure that it did hurt her mental health and physical health as well.
Well, I think if you look back over the wives of Henry, in the beginning, if you like, there was a lot more pressure, there was a lot more kind of people pressure. They were putting pressure on the daughters or whatever and trying to push them through into that position. Whereas in his later years, people are going, no, I'm not getting involved with that guy. You know what I mean? He's like, we're not interested. But it is, and you can understand where the pressure came from in that respect, I guess. So,
I think sorry.
So no, go on.
I was just going to say, I think as well, there's a bit of a myth that Thomas Boleyn pushed Anne to the king's bed, when we actually have a document from I think it's either 1531 or 1532, where Thomas Boleyn tries to say to Anne, if you don't want to marry him, you don't have to.
All right.
I just think that's really interesting.
I've not heard of that before, I must admit, because I always presumed that families were obviously vying for position in the court. So if they had an opportunity to move over somebody, you know, and push their daughter or whatever, even just push the family name, they would do everything they could to put themselves in a higher position. So that's new to me. So anyway, I'll shut up. But understanding Anne's personality does offer a fascinating glimpse into her life and, I guess, the dynamics of the Tudor court. Now, beyond the central figures, there are, of course, other intriguing stories waiting to be uncovered. And there's been many tales. Some may be fiction, because that's how the Tudors were, I guess. They're a bit of a propaganda thing going on there. But out of all of the servants who quietly walked the hallways of Tudor England, which one stands out for you?
I mean, I think there are a few Tudor servants that are absolutely incredible, but one that does stand out for me is Maria de Salinas. She was the lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. We believe that she possibly came over in 1501 with Catherine when she was going to marry Prince Arthur. But I think what's incredible about Maria is she never wavered from her loyalty to Catherine. Even when the divorce was happening, she said, that is my mistress, that is my queen, there is no one else. And she was even liked by Henry. I think it's the 1520s or the 1510s. He names a ship after Maria because she's that high in favour with the queen. And when Catherine is cast out, Maria tries to go and be with her, and the king banishes her. And when Catherine is dying, Maria forces her way into Kimbolton and spends the last days of Catherine's life with her. And I think that's just such a testament to loyalty and friendship in what could be such a toxic place.
And especially, I guess, Henry's wrath was always hanging there in the background, wasn't it? So in some ways, she was quite brave to put herself forward like that, I guess, into that sort of position.
I mean, yeah, I think she really risked her position because her daughter is Catherine Willoughby, who was the second wife of Charles Brandon. So she wasn't just risking herself, she was also risking her daughter and her daughter's position as well. But I think all that really mattered to Maria was Catherine. I don't think she had... I think she'll have had loyalty to the king up until he started to move against her friend and queen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite possibly. It's a very strange time, I think, that whole period anyway, because after being happily married for like 20 years, all of a sudden he starts thinking about, well, why have I not got an heir yet? And I guess that's where it all started from. But it is interesting. But hearing about these figures who stood out in the quieter moments, shall we say, of Tudor history, gives us a unique perspective, and it also makes you think about the roles and relationships to those closest in the centre of power. Do you think the Tudor ladies in waiting could be trusted, and would their lives, especially in Henry's time, be just as volatile as the queens they served?
I think before the downfall of Catherine of Aragon, I think you could say a lady in waiting's life was quiet, simple, and I think they could have relatively been trusted unless they were a spy for Wolsey or the French. But I think once Anne Boleyn becomes queen, all of the lady in waitings from then on are volatile because it depends on their mistress. Mm-hmm. Anne Boleyn gets executed and all these ladies in waiting are just sent home because they'd have no mistress. Jane Seymour comes in as queen and then she brings her people in, so the people that Anne favoured are no longer in favour, so they just have to go home to their country estates. And it goes on with Anne of Cleves and Catherine Howard and then Catherine Parr. And I think to a degree maybe they could have been trusted, but I think maybe a good example of someone not being trusted might be Lady Jane Rochford. Now I know she's kind of a figure that is despised or people don't know what her intentions are, but I think Jane had been so addicted to court life. She had been there since she was a teenager. She'd been there since Queen Catherine of Aragon. I think by the 1540s, you are absolutely desperate to stay at court, to be on top, to avoid the king's wrath. And I think a lady in waiting by this point would do anything to stay in favour, even if that meant breaking the loyalty of a queen as well.
And she might have also thought that by that time, and that period of time that she'd spent there, that she was at the stage of being kind of, unstoppable. It was her right to be there. You don't know. We're all surmising these things, but that could be one of the reasons. Another thing about when you talk about ladies in waiting, there was Margaret Pole, who was a lady to Catherine of Aragon, and when Arthur died, she got sent away. But then when Henry married Catherine, she got invited back into the as a lady in waiting. So it's a very strange thing where they just discard them and then say, well, you can come back now, I've got another chap or whatever.
It's just so volatile, and I think it shows how much you've got to be in favour with the monarch, that truly the Queen does not have as much influence as you think she does. Mm. If you want to be in favour, you need to be in favour of the King, Wolsey, Cromwell, and then whoever was his right-hand man at the time as well.
And I think it's just, you can't really look at it from a perspective of today because it was just so different anyway. I don't even think anybody could imagine, although we have these productions on TV and stuff, but you just can't imagine. It must have been really dull, actually, at times, because you watch say Wolf Hall and it's done and dusted in an hour, but that could have been spread over like 5 years. what they've shown you in an hour. It must have been like quite tedious at time, just sat there, knitting and sewing and whatever they did. But anyway, I mean, the lives of the Tudors, ladies in waiting, is undoubtedly filled with intrigue and uncertainty, and it reflects, like you said, that volatile period that they would have inhabited. Now, shifting focus, your work takes you to some of the most remarkable places connected to this fascinating era, and I know you travel around the country extensively and report on some of the most iconic buildings. So, out of all the ones you've seen, which is your favourite?
I'm going to have to give you two, because there are two that I absolutely love. So my first one is Hever Castle. I love it. I've been there twice. It's the childhood home of Anne Boleyn, for anyone that doesn't know. But when you go there, you do feel like you've gone back in time, because the castle's not changed. Now, I need to go back and see what they've done to the Boleyn apartments, because I know that will transport me back right there.
What?
But my second one, it's local to me, and it's Little Morton Hall. It was built in the 16th century again, and it was built by the Morton family. And it's the most beautiful, wonky building ever. It is literally, you're going up the path and you can see that it's tilting. And you're like, how is that still standing? And whenever I go, because I've been a few times, I just love it. I think it's one of the best places, and it's full of history. And I think the Mortons are interesting as well, because they didn't see a point of going to the Tudor court. So I think they had a clue about how toxic the place was as well.
Whereabouts is that? Is that in the north of England or Morton?
So Little Morton is in Cheshire.
Oh, okay. I've been to Hever. It is an amazing place, and I would encourage anybody who's not been, if you get the opportunity, just go and have a look, because it is beautiful, especially with the moat around it and everything. It really sets it off, doesn't it, sort of thing. And it is a great place to visit. Although there's been quite a number of renovations. I can't remember the name of the guy who lived there, who bought it. Was he a billionaire or something, or early part of the 20th century, was it? I can't remember his name now.
Oh, is it Astor?
Astor.
That's it.
That's Astor. Yeah. Because there's quite a number of the rooms in there that have been left as he left them, haven't they? But it's the upstairs area, I think, that's the apartments that are more interesting to people.
I think the upper is more original, and I think maybe the ground floor is relatively original.
Could be, yeah.
You know, that one room, and then when you go off, it's more the modern stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it is. I know he. Like, obviously, if you buy any house, you're going to put it the way you want it, aren't you? You're not going to think, I'm having it like Henry, you know what I mean? I just want it like I want it. So, fair play to him. But it is, it's a fabulous place to visit. And Little Morton Hall, I'm going to have to look that one up then, because I've not been there.
It's really good. I can't recommend it enough. The volunteers there dress up as well.
Is it English Heritage?
National Trust.
Oh, National Trust, is it?
It is just incredible. I think the volunteers make it as well, because they dress up, and when you ask them a question, they are happy to answer. Yeah. And they'll also take you and show you witch marks that are in the wood that have been made.
So is it fully decorated as well inside? Does it have furniture and everything? And
has some of the original furniture still from the 16th and 17th century.
Oh, right. I'll mark that down in my little black book, and maybe next year when the sun decides to appear again, I'll to have a little run up and see what it's all about. Now, exploring these buildings obviously gives you a unique perspective on this fascinating period, but it also raises interesting questions about the broader impact of the people who shaped that area. Now, as dynasties go, the Tudors' reign is without doubt one of the most significant in history. So do you think it's purely based on Henry's reign, or should we look deeper into other characters?
I think the Tudor period is more than Henry's reign, and that is someone that loves the six wives of Henry VIII. I think if you look at how the Tudor reign started, it started with a bang. Henry VII, Henry VIII's father, won the throne by conquest. And he didn't have an easy reign either. He had 2 uprisings, Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck. But he did have sons, which did secure him. But he also brought financial stability to the crown. And I don't think England was as wealthy in his son's reign as it was in his father Henry's reign. But I also think you've got to look at the religious change as well, which I know is in Henry's reign, but it impacts all 3 of his children's reign as well. You see Edward, his son, who is a complete Protestant and does radical Protestant changes. He sadly dies at 15, and then his older sister Mary comes in and makes the most Catholic changes, and people die because of their faith. And then when she dies, Elizabeth comes to the throne, and she says that she's not bothered about Catholic or Protestant. And we know she does go back on her word a few times. But that's what she said. And I think it's also the political changes as well. When Henry did the Reformation, we lost a lot of alliances in England. We lost our alliance with Spain, with France, and we had to look elsewhere. We lost the support of the Pope. And I also think as well is the social changes as well, because you're seeing the likes of Thomas Wolsey and Thomas Cromwell, who was a butcher's son and a blacksmith, rise up to be one of the most wealthiest men in the kingdom, which might have given other people ideas to be like that as well. If we can have that, why can't we? I think the Tudor period is fascinating, but is also so turbulent. And I think it is mainly because of the religious changes that Henry VIII enacts. Because even when he enacts them, he's still a Catholic at heart, and it's quite obvious he's still a Catholic at heart. But he also does bolster the Navy. He makes us very much a Navy nation. He does defend our borders properly. But I think if you look at the characters like Thomas Cromwell, Thomas Wolsey, and many other people, there's just so many to name. It is more than just Henry and his 6 wives. We have to look at the whole period.
And it is... I was speaking to someone about this the other week, and I was saying that everything changes really after Catherine of Aragon. Everything. His complete attitude and his mindset seem to just go off on a tangent. And I think the other problem that I think Henry had, and probably didn't realise, was that everybody just agreed with him. There was nobody out there who was going to say, Henry, I'm not having this. That's just completely wrong. Everybody kind of agreed with him, so everybody was a yes man. And I don't think that really helped him, because every decision he made then from going forward, everybody said, yeah, great idea. In the background, they might be saying, he's completely lost it. But to his face, they're going to say, yep, I completely agree with you. And I think that's one of the problems, because he didn't have anybody who would. And maybe that's where Anne Boleyn fell, because she did have that daring, if you like, to stand up to him and say what she thought. And Cromwell obviously didn't like it. And that's why Cromwell did what he did to try and get her removed. But, it's again, I guess we'll never really know. Now, we'll move on. I mean, it's obviously... how do I put this? There is, like you said, there's compelling characters and there's pivotal moments that shape that Tudor dynasty. And among them, Henry VIII's actions stand out as particularly impactful, raising, again, more questions about his motivations and the consequences of his reign. Now, we all know he was a tyrant, and his infamous ways caused major problems for the country across his reign. But do you put this down to his, like I guess we touched on it briefly, his want for a male heir, or simply to his detriment of everything else?
I think a major thing is the fact he wants a son. I think that is why he divorces Catherine. I think that's why he pursues Anne Boleyn. But I also think that when Anne and Thomas Cromwell show him he can have more power if he leaves Rome, he is aroused by this, to put it simply. He thinks a king can be more powerful. I can be like a god. And I think that is Henry's personality to a T. I think power was his ultimate pleasure, having control over everybody. That's why he rises Thomas Cromwell so high, because he can go, I made you out of nothing. He does the same with Thomas Wolsey, and then he can bring them down because he's the king, and I think he loves that. You see it with Catherine Howard as well. She wasn't meant to be queen, and when he brings her down, he makes sure it's slow and it's detrimental to her mental health. And then he goes, I can execute you because I'm king. And I think that is Henry to a T.
Do you think it was just, I guess when you say it was a power thing, that's when I touched on before about everybody just agreed with him. So he never really had a balanced, objective to what he was doing. It was always, whatever I say, it's going to be agreed upon. And I think that's the problem. I think if there'd have been one or two that would have stood up to him, or not necessarily stand up to him in a way that, you're appeasing him in every way, shape and form, but just offer him different, ideas, I think it might have triggered something a little bit different. I mean, we don't know, because it does seem like that all his life was his want for this male heir. And I guess being a spare brother, as he was with Arthur being original, if Arthur had not died, he would not have sat on the throne, would he? And things would have been, we might not be even talking about him today.
No, I think as well, it's the people that said no to him died. One of his longest serving advisors, Thomas More, said, no, Henry, this is wrong. And he was executed, and so was John Fisher.
Yeah.
He just he wanted to be told, yes, this can be happen. Nothing's in the way. And you see with Thomas Wolsey was a yes man. And when he couldn't get that divorce, he was no longer wanted.
Right. Let's move on. Because Henry's reign, as we all know, it left a significant mark on history. There's no doubt about that. And it was shaped by his ambitions and his personal desires, which again, we've just talked about. Now, moving from the pages of history to its portrayal on screen, let's explore how these figures have been brought to life. So, in your opinion, over the years, which actress and actor have portrayed, say, Anne Boleyn and Henry the best?
Well, I have a modern and old Henry and Anne that I think have portrayed them the best. So firstly, it's Genevieve Bujold in Anne of the Thousand Days from 1969. I think she captures the spirit of Anne Boleyn amazingly. I think she shows how Anne could be cruel, could be hot-tempered, says something rash, but she also shows Anne's vulnerability, her kindness, her love. And I don't think we're going to get that in an Anne Boleyn actress today. But Keith Michelle as Henry VIII, he, from the 1970s, I think is Henry VIII.
He does look like him.
He looks like him. And I think his tempers, the Keith Michelle Henry VIII temper, is genuinely frightening. The way he can just go from absolute happiness to just silence, I think was terrifying. And then I have to say, I love Natalie Dormer from HBO The Tudors for modern Anne Boleyn. I think even though there are a lot of inaccuracies, Natalie Dormer researched Anne and tried to make her as accurate as possible and tried to break from the narrative of being Anne Boleyn as the other woman. Now, we mentioned Wolf Hall before. I have to say Damian Lewis is also another fantastic Henry. I think he shows how unpredictable Henry can be and how everyone around him is like, do we laugh? Do we go, oh no? And you see that in series 2 at the moment. Everyone's like, try to, do I clap? Do I not? I just think they're the best out of what I've seen.
I agree with Natalie Dormer, I do think, I think anybody who's seen it will know it's not historically accurate, but as a piece of entertainment, it's very hard to beat the Tudors, regardless. It's an amazing 4 series, whatever long it went on. It went on for months, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Have you seen Firebrand, by the way?
I have.
What did you think of Jude Law? Because for me, he just doesn't do it for me.
I wasn't as convinced. I know that a friend of mine might hit me over the head.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about.
Because she loves the film.
I know. It was a great film. I just didn't think Jude Law was very good as Henry VIII. That was my gripe, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't really like him, but I might get slapped for that. So.
Hey, well, she didn't slap me, so you'll be all right. And if anybody knows who we're talking about, in fact, they probably don't, but anyway, we'll keep it quiet. Now, it's always fascinating to see how, I guess, different interpretations bring historical figures to life on screen. Speaking of stepping back in time, though, let's imagine for a moment what it would be like to witness history firsthand. So if you could go back to just one day in Tudor times to see what really happened, which date would that be and why?
Now, I've thought about this question really long and hard because I didn't know what to say, but I've decided I would like to go back and be a fly on the wall when Anne Boleyn receives the first letter from Henry VIII. I want to see her genuine reaction. I want to see everything she says and is thinking and does. And I mean, there's some obvious ones. I'd like to see what their wedding was like. But I just think I'd love to see, without a filter, what was her reaction to that first letter? Was she scared? Was she happy?
It's hard to know, isn't it, how she would have kind of reacted. Possibly a little bit of both, I guess. Because I imagine being sort of cajoled along by a king would have been a very nervy experience. And I think that's probably the same throughout any era of history. You know, if there's a prince or a king is approaching and showing signs of affection, you're going to be took aback, I guess, initially, and be surprised and everything else. But so is that the only one then, do you think? Or it mentioned a wedding as well. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to be greedy because I said just one occasion, but if you've got 2 or 3, then that's fine.
I think I'd like to see their wedding. When were they actually married? Because obviously we have 2 contested dates. We think it's either November 1532 or January 1533, or possibly both. So maybe if there's 2 weddings, I want to see both.
Do you think, would you want to be a part of it though? Or would you just, like you said, be a fly on the wall just so you could see what happened?
I think a fly on the wall, or like a washerwoman, so I'm just like completely ignored.
I can't imagine a washerwoman being at Henry VIII's wedding, but you never know, do you? I mean, times were different times, so there might have been somebody there just to mop up any slops or anything that were caused.
Staying on his blouse.
Yeah, you never know, do you? You never know. You never know. Anyway, it's time now to talk about Jessica. So, where can people find out more about you and information about your travels through Tudor England, and of course, any other social media sites you'd like to share?
So you can find me on Unholy Tudor on Instagram. I'm also on Threads and recently Blue Sky, which has just started up. I also have the Tudor Her Story on Instagram as well, so you can follow what guests I have coming up on the podcast. My podcast is on Spotify, and I think it's on Apple Podcasts, and it's also on Amazon Music. I think it's on a few platforms, and I think Spotify tells you where to find that. I also think I'm still on YouTube. I've not posted on there in a while, but as Unholy Tudor, I'm here. Ignore him.
As you attack the dog.
Yeah. I've attacked the dog. I'm on Holy Tudor on most things, but if you want the podcast specifically, it's the Tudor Her Story. And usually story is in all caps as well. I am currently writing a historical fiction book on Elizabeth Woodville, which hopefully, fingers crossed, I can get it published in the next few years. Currently still researching it, but I'm quite excited to share that with followers very soon.
Yeah, you'll have to come back and tell us all about that one then when it's eventually published. But for anybody who's watching this or listening, all Jessica's links will be down in that description box below. So, Jess, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible knowledge and passion for Tudor England. Your insights, of course, have brought a fascinating period to life, from its iconic figures to its pivotal moments, and it's clear how much you love uncovering the stories that shaped history, and it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your perspective. So thank you for taking us on a captivating journey through the Tudor world. We're grateful for your time, and we hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved coming on and talking the Tudors.
It's been a pleasure. And as always, to everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much. We've still got some more incredible guests coming on History Speaks. So if you love history, you'll love History Roadshow. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss of any of our historical stories. And until next time, keep exploring the past with us, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.